The first investor presentation I had, someone mocked me a little by saying that you are India's 181st fantasy sports platform. How do you even think that you'll succeed? And that's when I was pretty sure that this is the common myth, because the entry barrier in the industry was very low. Everyone was launching a fantasy sports platform day in day out, but we knew that this is a very long haul. This business requires a lot of relentless focus on customer and sports, and if we are able to do that for a couple of years, we'll establish our position from being the 181st to being a part of the top 5, and that's exactly what has happened.
Hello everyone, my name is Neil Patel and thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Indian Startup Show. Today my guest is Amit Purohit. He is the CEO and co-founder of Fantasy Akhada, a fantasy sports platform that provides you with an opportunity to play fantasy cricket, fantasy football and fantasy kabaddi by using your sports knowledge and skill. So today he talks about building a hyper-growth sports tech startup, going from the 180th fantasy app to being in the top 5. Amazing stuff. He talks about the USP, focusing on customer delight, and talks about marketing and why they focus on quality, not volume. Talks about a great story about how he got legendary cricket commentator Harsha Bhogle into becoming a brand ambassador and investor with a cold email. He gives great advice for first-time founders. He talks about his primary role as a founder and how it's changed. And finally, some fantasy sports do's and don'ts for first-time players and much more. So please enjoy the show. Thank you. Hello, Amit. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Hi, Neil. Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here on your show.
Please tell listeners what you're building.
We're building a sports tech startup in India.
Yeah.
Our flagship brand is called Fantasy Akhada, which is basically a fantasy sports platform which runs in India. It is currently India's one of the top 5 fantasy sports platforms right now, and we've been in the business only for 2.5 years. And the idea is to keep developing world-class products in the domain of sports, in the field of tech. With the single point agenda of driving sports engagement in the country, as we believe that sports engagement in India is still, at the tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is to build a, legal, scalable and a profitable business. And that's what we endeavor to do, because we believed that, fantasy sports is like the single most important lever to drive people to watch more sport or consume more sport. Because the moment you start investing in fantasy sports, then your propensity to consume that particular sport goes up, because then you end up tracking that sport a little more. You end up following those matches, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we are building Fantasy Akhada. We've built Fantasy Akhada, in fact. Now we are getting into other domains and building newer products. But yes, Fantasy Akhada is our flagship product right now.
Sounds very exciting. Where did you come with the idea? Where was the light bulb moment?
So I used to work with India's leading broadcaster before we started up. So and it was Star Sports, as you must be aware. So India's leading sports broadcaster is Star Sports, and that is where I used to work. And in our corporate presentations, always we used to see this number that India's sports engagement at a per capita level is abysmally low, while at a aggregate level we follow a lot of sport because of the sheer population of the country and because of the crazy following that cricket has in the country. But if you look at it at a per capita level, people don't consume that much sport very regularly. And that is when the idea came up that, if we were to build a sports tech startup which is scalable and which makes more and more people follow more and more sport, then the headroom is immense. And that is when, I started, talking to people. I come from a very, normal upper middle class background and with no entrepreneurial experience in my family before. So it was a big deal to, to leave your job and start up on your own. But then I put together a team of 6 people, because I believed that it's not just about the idea. You need to have the skill sets in-house to be able to, scale the product the way you want to and the way you envisage. So then I started putting together a team of people from my friend circle or my first connections or second connections, where people would be skill set, relevant in terms of what they bring to the table. So we got a person for tech, for analytics, for digital marketing, and we put this founding team together way back in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea came from there. Then about which brand to launch first, and that is when we did a deep research in terms of how, what are the levers to drive sports engagement. And that is where fantasy sports came up as a number one lever. And at that time in India, fantasy sports were launching, fantasy sports platforms were launching day in, day out. So I remember the first investor presentation I had, someone mocked me a little by saying that you are India's 181st fantasy sports platform. How do you even think that you'll succeed? And that's when I was pretty sure that this is the common myth, because the entry barrier in the industry was very low. Everyone was launching a fantasy sports platform day in day out, but we knew that this is a very long haul. This business requires a lot of relentless focus on customer and sports, and if we are able to do that for a couple of years, we'll establish our position from being the 181st to being a part of the top 5, and that's exactly what has happened. So we've been a part of this growth story as far as this industry is concerned in the country, and right now we are looking to consolidate our positions amongst the top 3 brands in the country.
Awesome. Sounds very exciting, that. Can you share some stats then? Obviously, you started 2 years ago. Now you're in the sort of top 5 in terms of like users, daily active users, etc., etc.
So we have crossed 2.5 million, registrations and users on our platform. From a growth point of view, if you were to talk about from last IPL to this IPL, we've almost, last IPL was in the month of September, October, when the IPL got pushed to between 2 parts, right? So the second half happened in the month of September, October, and the IPL has happened this year in April. So between September to April, we've tripled our numbers across, whether it is value growth, whether it is volume growth, whether it is active users, whether it is the rake that we are charging or the commission that we make, the top line that we make. So there has been a 3x jump across all metrics, which is phenomenal for us. And that's where we are looking to look at, say, for example, 24 months down the line, we look to have anywhere between 5 to 10% market share in this industry, which will comfortably place us at a number 3 position, where this industry is dominated by Dream 11, where they almost have close to 70-75% market share. So the idea is that consolidate our position and be at a 5 to 10% market share, say for example 18 months down the line.
So let's go back to the start then. So obviously you got the team of 6, and you were being mocked. How did you get it off the ground then? Talk about briefly talk about the research and the sort of the product development side of things, the customer development, etc., and stuff like that.
What we were very confident about was that we had all the skill sets to start the product. We had a person from tech, we had a person who could do the digital marketing and scale it up. We knew people who could focus on business development and making the regular existing fantasy sports players come onto the platform. We had analytics background within the team, in the founding team of 6 people who could churn out data in terms of what offer to be given to what customers, etc. So we had all the skills in-house. Of course, money was something. We all came from backgrounds which were very service class kind of background. So we were very sure that we have to bootstrap a little, raise from friends and families, and that is what we did in the first. I remember from 2020 Jan to April 2020 is this is all we did, bootstrap and raise from friends and folks around for the first 3 to 4 months. I remember we were just thinking that probably we've not raised enough. I still remember it was a total raise of 30 lakhs, which is basically 3 million Indian rupees, and we were just about to hit the IPL April of 2020, and that is when COVID struck in the month of March of 2020. And while this is probably not the best thing to say or the right thing to say, but for us, I personally believe that COVID was a blessing in disguise at that time, because we definitely had not raised enough given the bootstrap nature of our startup. We had underestimated the kind of money that we'll need for the first 5-6 months, including the IPL. And when the IPL got pushed from April, May indefinitely for the next half of the year, we got a window of approximately 2 months to implement our learnings that we had done in Jan, Feb, March, and then see where we were going wrong. So it was a period where we had zero fixed cost, but it was also a period where our competitors were expecting a lot from the IPL. So they were slightly taken aback that the IPL was pushed. But we were, we had our learnings to improve the product based on our customer feedback for the first 3 months. And then we also got a lot of runway to raise properly in terms of our seed round. And that is what really helped us. So that period from April of 2020, where there was global shutdown of sports across the world, there was no sport happening anywhere, and our app was also not serving any customers at that time. That is when I started putting together this whole piece of how do we raise our first seed round, and I went to angel investors who were looking at giving us money at that time. And we were also clear from our first 3 months that we needed a brand ambassador. Because in India, if there are 181 fantasy platforms, how will your fantasy platform stand out? So you'll need to have a face to it. So these were the 2 things that we learned from Jan, Feb, March. And then in the global shutdown and the COVID lockdown period, we implemented, we in fact dedicated all our energies to get these two things sorted. And that is when we raised the first round, which was approximately a crore and a half, which is in Indian rupees at that time, and from an angel investor. And also we managed to get Harsha Bhogle on board as our brand ambassador. So this was July, August, when all these developments happened. And then we were very sure that now we've raised enough, because the IPL was announced in the month of September. The IPL had to take place in that month. So we were very prepared that now with Harsha on board, with the money that we needed to have the first IPL on board, we were pretty settled at that time. So the first year was, in fact, learnings have been there throughout. In fact, all of 2021 has also given us a lot of learnings. But primarily, absolutely not able to estimate how much money you need right at the beginning was something that went very, very wrong. But God was kind that, we got that 2-3 month period where we could get our act right. And since then, we've been raising as and when required. And since then, touch wood, it has been a good journey.
Awesome. What are the other key learnings then, going back to the early days, that the key takeaways, and what kind of customer feedback did you get then?
Key learnings I primarily always divide into two parts. One is customer feedback and one is investor feedback, which is what we got at that time. Customer feedback was that, your app does not have a brand ambassador. What if you will run away with all the money that you take as deposits? They feared that, are you a reliable? So I remember in this industry, and this is a very interesting anecdote, that, in this industry, we realized that the market leader was operating with a chatbot for the customer care piece, right? So basically, if the customer has a problem, then he or she can chat with the chatbot on the customer care part of the app and get the query resolved, right? Now, basically, what the competition also did in this industry was that they felt that if the market leader is not having a customer care, why should we have a customer care? Because probably this industry does not need customer care as such. And that is where we thought that there's a huge opportunity. We became the first app in the month of Feb of 2020, in our second month, I remember, where we launched 24/7 customer care. We launched customer care on phone and email 24/7. And, that time it was just the 6 of us. So we used to take customer. I still remember my wife having nightmares about how many calls we'll get in the night when we were sleeping, because people would call you anytime, right? Because there might be a New Zealand cricket match happening at 3:30 in the morning, India time. And if a customer has an issue, he or she will call, right? So if you've given a number, then you have to be prepared for calls throughout. But we believe that this could be a complete game changer for us. And in fact, you won't believe that today we are India's only app which has a 24/7 customer care for fantasy sports users. And it has become, and today, I still remember this anecdote on 31st of December 2020 at 12 in the night, when people were wishing each other Happy New Year. I remember even then, the founders of this company used to handle customer care. Even then, I remember it was 1 year into the business, we used to still handle customer care. And at 12:01, I got a call on the customer care where I picked up, and I wanted to understand what the query was. And the person said that, "Sir, today I've just called to wish you Happy New Year. No other app does this, but you have 24/7 customer care. So today there's no problem. I'm just calling you to wish you Happy New Year and take the time off and leave the customer care piece right now." and that was the most heartwarming moment for me, at least, because this industry is such, Neil, that you expect a plethora of calls and a flood. What if the app goes down just before the IPL? People fear that there will be so much inflow of calls that we'll not be able to take it, because it is very difficult to outsource this in our industry, because understanding of fantasy sports is something that's very, very critical for someone who's handling customer care. So we've invested a lot in hiring the right kind of people. We keep this whole piece in-house. We don't outsource it to a call center. We keep it in-house. We invest a lot of money and energy in human resource training, development, and learning. And we've been doing that for the last 2.5 years, from the first employee who came on board to the 57th employee who has come yesterday. I remember, there is a completely clear, chalked out training program plan for everyone who comes into the system. And that is where we've been able to differentiate in a big, big manner. So that is something as far as customer feedback is concerned. Investor feedback, often, you know how the VC template works. People used to often ask us that, what is the differentiator? How do you differentiate from others? And we often used to say, service and customer centricity and all of that. But people are very hell-bent on what is the different thing that your platform offers. and I often used to, with my partners, I used to often laugh it off that, the Supreme Court of India has clearly said that there is only one model of fantasy sports that you can run. So if for the heck of differentiation, you are actually going to tweak the product, you're borderline illegal, right? Because Supreme Court is not allowing any other format. So there have been instances where people took a lot of time to understand this. Probably, the VC market at that time also was maturing towards understanding this industry and the magnitude of this industry. So for the like I believe that the second year has been more challenging. Like 2021 and 2022 have been more challenging in the sense that, to understand business, scale business, and take business to the next level. 2020 was a lot about, making people understand the cliche and making people understand what the reality was. So that is something that took us the first 12 months, and we were very, very hell-bent and clear that, our focus is very clear that we want to deliver a sports-centric, customer-centric platform. And if we believe that we can do that, then we'll differentiate ourselves in a big way. We don't need to, do tweaking in the product for the heck of it. So this is how the journey has been primarily.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of customers think of customer service as like a cost center, but you're saying, look, it's not a cost center. This is where you can improve your competitive USP, as it were.
Correct. I always believed that it is a USP. It still is. We have a key account management program for the top users of our app. We have a customer care which runs 24/7 for the entire user base that we have on our platform, and no other. A lot of investors used to tell me that one fine day one player will come who will replicate all of this, and what will you do then? And I personally believe that top-notch service, if replicated also, is very difficult to sustain. And I would be more than happy if this industry replicates this service, right? If this kind of nuanced service that we provide, if the industry does this and replicates this and copies this, I'll be more than happy, because then this industry will grow faster than we are growing right now. So, and I will continue to aim to get a bigger chunk of the market share as compared to my competitors, and that will be an ongoing battle. But I personally knew that it will be a very, very tough task for people to replicate it. Not many have been. In fact, we still are the only app in the country to have a 24/7 customer care, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, let's talk marketing then. I'm assuming it's basically you're targeting men, between 19 and 35.
We basically look at targeting people from 19 to 35 as far as our marketing campaigns are concerned. And most of the predominant audience predominant would be an understatement. All our male players. So that is how our marketing campaign is designed. What we've tried to differentiate, on as far as marketing is concerned, right, is that we've not tried to, explore levers of acquisition where we are not sure of quality. So I'll tell you what happens in our industry is that there are a lot of performance marketing or digital marketing campaigns that give you a lot of volume. It gives you, all the necessary metrics to tick box your user acquisition targets. But what really happens is that if you don't get the right quality from this kind of acquisition, then eventually your value targets will suffer. So we've been very, very clear that, we will not go for sheer volume. We will look at the right channels of acquisition. India, you won't believe, in India, in the Premier League broadcast of the Premier League broadcast in the country was absolutely not being leveraged by fantasy sports platforms for advertising, because marketing was considered to be done on cricket, because Dream 11 was very active on cricket. So most platforms used to leverage cricket. We were the first brand in the country to do an annual deal with Star Sports for the Premier League broadcast of this country, because our belief was gameplay, whether it comes on cricket or football, is immaterial, right? We are more focused on getting more and more people to play more and more on Akhada. That's it. Whether they are playing cricket, kabaddi, football, none of our business. We have to just try and see where there is an open area where we can advertise, catch the attention of the user, get him to download the app and get him to get playing, right? That was our thought process. If cricket was expensive, why would I buy cricket? And the ROI would be absolutely, abysmal, right? So we were very clear. So since the time we started advertising on football, a lot of brands then started copying that, this is probably a good lever. I still remember we did an annual deal with the Sony Sports Network in this country, where we were very clear that we will not touch a single match where India is playing. We said that we will take all your matches where India is not playing. And, they were not getting takers for that kind of matches already. So they were more than happy to give us an annual deal. And that is where we got a lot of traction around the core user base in this country. Now, I'll give you an example. Now, just think that in India, if there is a match between West Indies and Sri Lanka T20I, who will be watching that match in this country? One, either that person has to be a purist of the top order, and secondly, a person who's playing fantasy sports. There is no third type of audience in this country who will watch West Indies versus Sri Lanka on a weekday in the evening, a T20 international. That is where we felt that if there is a person who's watching this match, then there is a likelihood that that person is a fantasy player, and hence let's bombard our ads on these platforms. So for the first 1.5 years, I remember our total marketing spend was 30 million Indian currency. Yeah. And in 3 crores, we got the entire football and the entire non-India cricket portfolio for the entire year. And that is where, our users who were watching these, our user base started getting a lot of good traction in terms of quality. People felt that this brand is not a seasonal brand around the IPL. This brand is here to stay. They are advertising throughout the year. And that is where we started to get that positive rub-off effect on the minds of the people as far as top of mind recall was concerned. So that has been a big. Now we've started, since the time we've been raising money, we've started advertising on the IPL itself as well. But there was a right time for everything, we believed. And that is where I think the game changer was, where we stayed away from any kind of marquee properties like India Cricket or IPL or T20 World Cup. And we advertised on the low-key events where we believed that the ROI was very high. And that, I believe, was a big success for us and was a game changer for us, from bringing us from 181 to number 5.
Yeah, definitely a game changer. You mentioned brand ambassador Harsha Bhogle, world famous cricket commentator. How did you get him on board?
So he used to often visit the Star Sports office when I was there, right. And I used to probably have that fanboyish moment and probably be nervous and not to walk up to him and ask for a picture or ask for an autograph. But after I started up, my thought process around the brand ambassador piece was very simple. It was that you're looking for a brand ambassador, and if that person doesn't stand for the vision of the organization, then you're probably not just doing justice to the brand that you are getting the brand ambassador for. And our vision was very clear, that we were not in here to just make a fantasy sports platform. Like I said at the beginning of our call, we were here to launch a startup which works in the domain of sports on the back of tech and drive sports engagement forward, right? And as a kid growing up, for me, definition of sports engagement to some extent used to be Jeffrey Boycott, Harsha Bhogle, Ravi Shastri, Wasim Akram, that whole panel which used to come on the cricket commentary that I used to see very often, right?
Yeah.
So Harsha Bhogle was that part of my growing up years where he was one of the reasons why I engaged more with sport than I would have if he was not commentating, right? So I believe that rather than going for a run-of-the-mill cricketer at that time, because I remember at that time Virat Kohli was taken. Obviously, even if he was not taken, we couldn't afford him at that time. But Virat Kohli, MS Dhoni, Rohit Sharma, they were all taken by bigger brands. My feeling was that if you get a subpar cricketer as your brand ambassador, you probably don't do your brand enough good. And if you get a world-class commentator who stands for the vision of the organization, in any case, for all that he's done all his life, he's just asked more and more people to be more engaged with sport through his commentary, right? So we believe that we will be able to stand out of the clutter and also get in a person who primarily stands for what we stand for. And that I felt was a marriage made in heaven. And that is where, I was not really sure if I will be able to get him on board. But I remember it was the month of July of 2020 when I wrote a cold mail to him. And, and I still remember that mail took 7.5 to 8 hours of drafting at my end. And finally, when I sent it, I got up the next morning and there was a mail from Harsha which said that you've used a lot of good names in your mail. Let me know when we can speak. And it was just a one-liner. And that is where I felt that probably he's connected with the mail. He was the first brand ambassador of Dream 11 and then had stayed away from all the fantasy sports platforms that had approached him. So I was a little nervous if he'll actually, agree to be a part of this journey. But then we spoke over call, and I think 2-3 mail chains, later we got him on board as the brand ambassador. Not just the brand ambassador, but he also invested in our business, and he continues to be a very active investor in our business across rounds.
Nice. What's the business model then? How are you making money out of it then?
So, Neil, the business model is pretty simple in fantasy sports. So, in fantasy sports, the business model is that let's assume that today there's a match between India and South Africa. 22 people will play that match. Neil Patel makes his team. Out of those 22 people, he selects his 11 and puts 500 bucks on it. Similarly, Amit Purohit has also picked up a team out of the 22 players who are playing, put 500 bucks on that as well, right? Now, Neil and Amit will go head to head. Whoever wins takes home 900 bucks and not the 1,000 bucks that were, pulled in. So the business model is that the fantasy sports platforms take a commission on the overall gameplay that's happening on the platform. So in our hypothetical example, me and you put 500 bucks each. So that was 1,000 bucks. But the winner took home 900 and not 1,000 because the 10% commission was kept by the platform. So that's the simple business model.
So give me some fantasy tips then, for first time players, what the do's and don'ts.
So basically it's very similar to, and that is what I tell people when they generally ask me that, what you're doing, is it slightly shady in India? Do people consider it legal, etc., etc.? And of course, I dispel those myths that whether it is legal or not. It is of course very legal. But as a consumer, I always say that you have to be it is very similar to stock market trading in India, right? It is, say, when I was growing up and I passed out of engineering, a lot of these people around me used to enter the stock market and trade, right? I had no knowledge of how the trading happens, right? I had no knowledge of financials of the companies, etc. And I somehow felt very uncomfortable putting money when someone else told me that buy this particular stock. I used to personally not favor that kind of principle where you're just asking from someone and putting money somewhere, right? So my belief was that if I have some sort of skill at my end and I'm able to make money out of that, then that is where I was more comfortable. And that is exactly what fantasy sports is. If you follow sport and if you have a basic understanding of the sport that you're following, whether it is cricket, football, kabaddi, use your intelligence and selection skills and accordingly back your knowledge rather than backing gut and taking punt calls, etc., because there is some sort of money involved. And of course, try to do this only as a pastime activity and as a fun activity, and always have an upper cap when you consider your losses, because this is something that you should not do. That's something that we always say in our disclaimers also, that financial responsibility is something that users must keep in mind. But I personally believe that analytics, it is a game of skill, and if people are backing analytics and using their selection skills, then it is proven by research that a more skilled player will more often than not win against a less skilled player. So follow your sport passionately, watch sport passionately, use your knowledge of the sport that you've gained by following it, and then make your teams, and then enjoy this as a pastime, and I'm very, very sure that you will love it.
All right, let's talk about you then. Background. Obviously you worked at Star Sports. What was the the thoughts of your employees and friends and family when you said, look, I'm going to quit this? And
so basically I'm an engineer by degree. I graduated out of an engineering college in 2009. Then I went to B school in India, Acceleri Jamshedpur, which was 2013. Then I worked in an FMCG company for 2 years before jumping into Star Sports, because I believed that selling something that you're passionate about is something that very few people get to do, and it was a lot of fun. So I joined Star Sports at that time. When I was wanting to start up, I just felt that the opportunity to do something in the domain of sports tech was very ripe. And by then I had been married for almost 6 to 7 years. And we were pretty settled in some of the basic things that you have to do after probably graduating, and basic responsibilities were taken care of, and we were in a very stable environment. So I felt like taking that risk at that time. I felt it was an opportune moment for me to take that risk. I also had a good body of 7 years of work experience, so if things didn't go the way I envisaged, then I could always go back to the corporate and get back to my own job. So I was very clear that this was a very and this was a punt worth taking at that time. In fact, personally at my end, my wife was very, very supportive at all times. So there was no question there. Of course, because the nature of the industry was slightly tricky, parents and some outsiders do sometimes feel that whether this is a business which is legit or not. And because at that time, regulation was also, firmly setting its feet on the ground in the country. And now it's much, much better than how it was at that time. So there was some sort of worry and resistance about what kind of, industry this is, and whether this will be because of Dream 11, the monster that there in the category, will it be good to start a business in this category? But again, I must say that barring these worries, even the parents were very supportive at both ends, at my ends and my wife's end, and the family overall was very supportive. But obviously, in the initial years, there was that fear around how it will pan out. In fact, that fear is still there, Neil. I'll be lying if I say that we are pretty settled as a startup. We are still a startup. We are still growing, and we need to do a couple of good years of good run rate and good revenue to be considering ourselves a safe sports tech organization. So that is always there, but the initial fear was very much there. But the dedication and the focus that was there in my head at that time, I think that convinced people around me. And like I said, investors also initially used to doubt, because there is a lot of competition in this market. How will we be able to stack up? But I think pretty much we've done a good job in terms of how we've come here so far.
How would you sum up the journey so far then?
I personally believe it has been the best 2.5 years of my life, or 3 years of my life. In fact, as far as learning is concerned, I wouldn't have learned as much as and not just professionally, but also in terms of my own personal development, in terms of maturity and patience and anger management. And I personally feel that I have grown way too much than I would have if I was in the corporate over the last 3 years. As far as how the company is shaping up, honestly speaking, if you would have given me this situation today, where we are today, 2.5 years back, I would have grabbed it with both hands. So to summarize, I feel that from a professional standpoint, yes, we are in line where we wanted to be, and where I saw this organization 2.5 years after. So I think pretty much there. I think we have one or two last legs of acceleration that we need to do in the way we go about, whether it is business growth or fundraising, etc. And then, like I said, we'll be able to call ourselves a stable organization in terms of growth and a trajectory upwards. So that is something that will happen soon, I feel. And as far as personality development and growth at a personal level is concerned, I think, like I said, I've learned a lot than I could have ever imagined in the last two. And in fact, I sometimes surprise myself when I reflect on some of the reactions that I've had or the way I've handled certain situations. So pretty satisfied with where we are and where I am personally.
Did you ever come close to giving it all up? Was there any a point?
So not personally not personally, but yes, there were times when your bank balance told you that you will have to give it up. So in my head, there were times in the month of March of 2021 where I used to feel that probably we'll not be able to see this sail through. But I just feel that the team, and that is where I give a lot of credit to the founding team that I have here with me, because all of them had some skill that they brought to the table. I personally was just responsible for management, fundraising, and all of that, right? So I personally feel that they did a lot of hard work in that 1.5 year, where we were almost very close to probably not seeing this sail through. But God at that time saw all the hard work that the team had put in, and probably miraculously saved us in terms of raising the funds at just the right moment before the IPL of 2021. And we can't be thankful to God enough with the way it panned out. But I feel when you put in the hard work, then somehow the whole universe conspires to just ensure that things move in the right direction, and that's what exactly happened. So personally, have never been disappointed or shattered by the situations or sometimes some mishaps that happen in the journey to start thinking in the lines of giving up. But the only moment you start feeling like that is when your bank balance tells you that probably you won't be able to run this show. So yeah, it happened once, but I'm really glad that God saw all the effort that we had put in, and it that phase also passed.
Talk about the co-founders then. Were you all friends before you started, or did you not know each other?
We were yes, all friends. We were not really friends, but yes, we were all in the same. We were in the same background. So I remember how this whole thing started was when myself and my partner Pratik, we used to work in the same organization. So we thought of this, and then we said, yeah, this seems like this is something great. Then we reached out to a friend who was in my college, and he was my batchmate at XLRI Jamshedpur, and we also reached out to one person who was my senior at XLRI Jamshedpur. So from two we became four. Then we knew that we needed someone from the tech team. So my senior at Excel, he connected me to this person who had an out and out tech background for 10 years. So we felt that he could be the right guy to lead tech for us as part of the founding team. But then we also knew we needed someone who had the overarching business view and can drive, and who understands data, consumer data, and is able to manage the consumer life cycle management. And we knew someone in our you follow the FPL, right? So we also play a lot of FPL in India. So there was this FPL group of ours, I remember, where the five of us felt that this boy called Sumit, he probably could be the perfect piece to complete the puzzle. And I remember it was I think game week 28 of that season, when I went down after the game week to Bombay to meet Sumit. We discussed the opportunity that I was thinking in my head, etc. He jumped onto it immediately, and that's when we got this whole team together. So he was also at Excel with me. So we have, out of the 6 people, we have 4 people who are from XLRI Jamshedpur, which was the B school where we all went to. There was one person from Star Sports and one person with the tech pedigree to set up this founding team.
Yeah, and you mentioned hiring strategies. We talked about hiring earlier. Do you have any hiring strategies for people who are listening, who may be going through the same thing?
So basically, I personally believe that it is just the founding team at that level where you need to really have the buy-in into the vision of the organization. After that, when you're looking to hire people, sometimes people get carried away with interest in the industry, and they put a lot of undue weightage to that factor. I personally believe. Today also, when we look at hiring for most of the roles, we don't put a lot of emphasis on passionate sports fans to come into the organization. If you're looking to hire a backend developer and he or she does not follow sport, then there is no problem, right? You are actually hiring for the skill set of being a backend developer, right? So sometimes I feel in startups, people get a lot of, they get carried away with this whole thing of, not looking at the skill set, but looking at the softer aspects and this whole passion piece of, what the vision of the organization, etc. We have to differentiate at all times that however inclusive you make it with ESOPs and all of that, there will always be a difference between a founder and an employee. And I know I probably might not sound very right when I say all of this, but I believe that it is a fact that people need to be really good at what they are being hired for, and that is primarily what you should evaluate them for. Of course, over a period of time, if they really like the culture that you've built here in the organization, and if you really appreciate them and grow them well, then they will also start believing in the vision of what you are trying to build. But to expect people to start believing in your vision and then be selfless and slog 7 days a week, etc., I personally feel is too much to expect. You should look at building an organization where the culture is absolutely apt for a person to come learn and groom. You should look at hiring a person for the skill set rather than for the vision that you have set. And third, you should have a lot of work-life balance for the employees and not just glorify hustle in the name of this whole startup culture and make people slog and expect them to continue to be loyal to you. So I have at least personally followed these 3 philosophies, and touch wood, it has been good in terms of managing attrition and making people grow into our system.
Has your job as a founder changed then? Because obviously you started off hiring, doing the fundraising. Are you still doing that? Is that your primary job now, or has it changed
now? So from call center executive to what I'm doing today, definitely it has changed. But now it's more about management and just ensuring that people are the delegation of leadership has happened and is happening in the right manner, not as something that I personally just focus on these days. Fundraising is something that I continue to take I have to lead that piece, and I do that. But right now, I think the majority of the day definitely has changed than how it used to look, even for that matter, 3 months back. Now I feel that we are a 60-member organization, close to a 60-member organization. We not just have a founding team, but we also have this concept of a SLT, which is called the senior leadership team, that we've built a layer below the founding team, which basically enables our the cascading of what we are trying to achieve at to the right bottom. So we've built all of that, and now today when I'm speaking to you, yes, the organization has become that mature and has people at various levels. So I can just focus on fundraising, and then just ensuring that this transition of leadership with the SLT coming in does not get lost, and is cascaded properly. So a lot of focus is just there. That's all.
Awesome. Well, last few questions. Advice for first-time founders.
Actually, probably I'm not I still don't call myself a successful startup or a successful founder. So sometimes find it really awkward to give advice. But I personally feel that, don't get carried away with the cliche. I personally believe that, yes, it's good to read. It's important to read. You see a lot of commentary around startups and how you should raise money, how you should build a team, etc., etc. But I personally feel that you should just focus on what suits you best. I still remember that people used to tell me that 6 founders is too much. You will fight with each other, and all of this will collapse. I was of the school of thought that if I don't know tech and if I don't know customer lifecycle management, I just have the vision of what I'm building and I understand sports, how can I start up without a co-founder or without a founding team which does not have all of this expertise in-house? Because then otherwise I'll have to hire for this. And then, once you hire, then there is always that difference in the feeling of passion between you and the employee, right? However senior you are hiring him for. So my belief always is that you should do what suits you best. I knew that we needed a team at the time of starting up, that we needed a team which had the skill set. So we went with 6 founders. Never regretted it. In fact, proud of it till date. So that is point number 1. So this is example number 1. And secondly, a lot of people used to tell me that, having a lot of people on the cap table is a mess. I personally believe that at that time when VCs were shying away in terms of investing at that time, if you got a lot of people who were wanting to be a part of your growth story and believed in your vision as HNIs and family office investors, why not? Just because you will have to put in a lot of effort to manage a lot of people on the cap table does not mean you will not drive shareholder value forward, right? So my belief has just been that, don't go by the cliche. My advice to people who are starting up right now is that be very clear with what you want to do. Be very detail oriented before you start rejecting the cliches. My cliches are good because they are out of a lot of literature that you will read. So it's not always wrong. But if you have a lot of detail orientation around what you are trying to build, and it is completely opposite to sometimes what the cliche is, I think you should back your detail orientation over what you read.
Last question for people who want more information or interested in downloading the app, what must they do?
So you must just visit www.fantasyakhada.com. If you follow your sport, you should download the app, play your team. If you love your sport, I think you will start loving it a little more. And try out the platform, give us feedback. We are more than happy. We take pride in running a customer care which runs 24/7 and tries to resolve all sort of queries and tries to take all feedback in. So we'll be more than happy. But feedback and playing aside, my suggestion to people would be that download any fantasy sports app, not just Fantasy Akhada. Download the apps where you will see that your following of sport grows if you enjoy your fantasy sports responsibly. I personally feel that it makes you a lot more analytical. It makes you, it teaches you, playing fantasy sports teaches you a lot of life skills. And I'm not saying because I'm making people download the app. I genuinely believe that if you are a fantasy sports player, it teaches you a lot of life skills which only help you in the future.
Mm-hmm. What's your IPL team? Just out of interest.
My IPL team did not have Virat Kohli, and that's why I did really well. So it was a team which did back Lucknow Super Giants to do really well, Mumbai to not do well. So I had a lot of KL Rahuls, Rashid Khans from Gujarat, etc. in my team, and did pretty well this IPL. Yeah. So Joss Butler was my captain throughout for I think 75% of the IPL. Even when people were dropping him from the captaincy position because of law of averages, as they said in the first half of the season, I backed him right through the end. It did bother me a little in the end, but I guess he made me win my league, so I was pretty happy with it.
And in terms of the bowlers, who was the top bowler?
Rashid Khan, like I said, Rashid Khan was there. right up there in my team. So I've always been, and I've been a very, very ardent fantasy sports player, whether it's football, Premier League, or it is whether it is cricket. I have played. I think I play four. So I play Big Bash World Cup in the year. I play FPL. I play Champions League fantasy, and then I play IPL also, apart from all the startup running that I do. So I really enjoy my fantasy. But honestly, I do play so much because, not just because I want to understand the consumer, etc. That doesn't happen. I'm more a fan of season-long fantasy because I genuinely believe that it ticks my brain when you have to take calls week in, week out, day in, day out. I just feel that it makes you so much more sharper. So this IPL, I had Joss Butler, Rashid Khan, KL Rahul. Then we also had Mohammad Shami for some point. Then we had traded him out. So a lot of good players. In fact, I ended up winning the league. So I think it was a very, very good, successful IPL season.
Yeah, sounds good. And what's going to be the next big competition for you then, in terms of the fantasy sports?
Fantasy sports is a very non-seasonal business as compared to contrary to how people make it to be. So right now we have a lot of good quality cricket going on from the India cricket series to the in fact, for that matter, England versus Netherlands is also a very good series for us when it comes to fantasy sports in India. So there's a lot of bilaterals happening, but yes, we are gearing up for the T20 World Cup that will come in, and the FIFA World Cup that will come in. So really, really excited about the second half of the year where we'll have the T20 World Cup and the FIFA World Cup. And we are making a lot of changes to the app to make it look very new, fresh, faster, and slicker, to ensure that we are able to achieve path-breaking numbers on the back of the T20 World Cup and the FIFA World Cup.
Awesome. Amit, thank you for coming on the show today, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Neil. It was an absolute pleasure to have you to host me on this show, and thank you so much.
Awesome stuff, that. Cheers, buddy. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks to Amit for coming on the show today. For more information, check out fantasyakhada.com. That's the end of the show, and let's connect on facebook.com/Indian Startup Show and Twitter @IndianStartupSH, or email hello@neilpatel.co. Thank you and goodbye.